communicate with anyone, coaches or anyone. I mean, I mean, not to say they're calling him, not returning calls. Don't get me wrong, but I've always worried a little that if you're in that relationship, aren't you kind of biased toward, so I haven't. I mean, NBC Sports has picked up my stuff and run on blogs. Some of the blogs in New York, Philadelphia, and Chicago have all run with my stuff. So we're starting to get some nice, and I just always tell them, just crack sidewalks. We're just trying to generate the hits there. But we're getting some pizzazz. Pomeroy has emailed with me a few times, and he really is kind of the gold standard and said he likes the stuff I'm doing. Because part of what I argued to Dean Oliver, one thing about being in politics and journalism for that is you're always trying to simplify things so there's not just a few nerds who can understand it. One problem with Dean Oliver is he writes in his book, defensive stats are bad, therefore we need all statisticians to sit there and record. If your man scores, that's a point on you. If he doesn't score, it's a point against you. He basically has stat keeps monitoring everything. It's completely impractical. First of all, putting the pressure on a statistician to sit there and blame a player on your team for every basket. Well, what if the coverage is blown, the guy goes through and dunks? You're going to pick the one guy who was trying to chase him? So I try to simplify things. And this is what I've told Pomeroy, and particularly with this offensive rating versus how much they're playing. I said, look, if you keep putting something out that says this guy's a 130, but he's playing 5 minutes a game, people are confused. Does that mean he's really the best player? They just don't play him enough? I think you do kind of need that one central number. And Pomeroy's like the idea. I mean, I don't want to say he's endorsed the actual value add percentage I came up with, but he's been very positive on it.
I guess maybe to ask differently, do you think that, in this class we felt like, Moneyball kind of exposed some inefficiencies in baseball that other teams reacted to, right? So in that case, I guess I'm wondering, do you feel like the kind of work that you've been involved with or Pomeroy has exposed inefficiency maybe in recruiting or in the way college basketball teams play that might have changed the sport even in some ways? I mean, did they recruit different players or did they behave differently on the court because of what the numbers have said versus what sort of the eye might have said at one time?
Yeah, I think probably my stuff's too new to pretend that I think it's actually impacting anything. I have started to have some coaches around the country contacting, particularly on some of the models on high school guys and their competition. One of Creighton's assistant coaches emailed me about stuff last week trying to get a feel on how do you adjust for this. So I think we're very much the infancy stage on that. I'd love it in my mind, ego to go, 10 years from now they'll be saying you had the breakthrough. Yeah, I don't want to be at that level. I'm really more focused toward a fan-friendly. I almost think Dean Oliver, while I kind of rip on him a little bit for being too complicated a fan, I think he's almost perfect for coaches. I mean, if you've got a stat-related coach, they really want to delve into what are the 18 different things a player does. I want to get down to, let me summarize for the fan how good this guy is in one number. And Dean Oliver hates that. He's very much a don't do one number. So. Well, thank you all. Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, kind of to build off what he said, so do you think, whereas I guess we've read some things where the Moneyball, it's kind of had its day and now everyone's caught up to it, so do you think that basketball's still, behind the curve in that sense, or it's going to take another couple decades? Or?
It is, and first I'd contend with the first one. I mean, once you write a book on what you do, and I know Billy didn't write the book, but then that's over. Okay, so now we all know what you're doing, and we still have 10 times as much money as you. Yeah, so I don't think that disproves any of the Moneyball stuff. I just think it's out there. But yeah, I think you're right to some degree in basketball. But the real catching up basketball does have to do is on defensive stats, I think. And, gosh, you hear some of the quotes Buzz has and some of the things he tracks that aren't an official stat. Maybe he's already doing it. But they're really, for the fan, just two things you should add. One, you should add a forced turnover. I mean, if Vander's up playing a guy tight and he throws it out of bounds, Vander should get a forced turnover. Right now, it's just kind of a team. They turn it, or force a 24-second or 35-second, whatever. The second one is I do think you've got to record stops. That just means you can test a shot and he misses. You don't have to keep track of when they go in or the other, so that's too complicated. If you had those two, you'd know pretty much how good a defensive player everyone is, I contend. And that chart I put up, one thing I found when I went through 100 possessions is we only give defensive credit or blame 22% of the trips down the court. I mean, basically a block shot, a defensive rebound, or a steal. That's 22 out of 100 trips. The other 78, even in my formulas, you're basically saying, okay, you're the 5 guys on the court. I'm giving you all a fifth of the credit or a fifth of the blame. It's not very efficient, you know. So that's the one little change. I think if basketball could catch up there. But by the same token, back to the Moneyball example, let's just say if Marquette or someone else were already tracking that, I wouldn't want it to be a public stat. You know, if you've got it, you know, don't let it out there. Not as fan friendly, but you know it is. So yeah, but definitely okay. And that's what's tough. I just think baseball is so compartmentalized. I mean, the pitcher throws the ball to a batter who hits the ball toward a shortstop who makes a player. You know, you can measure as opposed to a more fluid situation on a court where, you know, I mean, we're not measuring picks. Picks are important. You know, there's just so much it's hard to get a hold of in a basketball game.
Yeah,
So
that was my other question was how do I guess basketball statisticians do it? Because I mean, baseball, every I guess pitch or every hit is an isolated incident, you know, that you can actually, I guess, go back and measure. How, like, are they still coping with that and how to do it? Because it's such a fluid game.
I think that's part of the reason you see 77 was Bill James and 03 was Moneyball. Yeah, it's a lot harder. And then, God forbid, you get into what the football guys are trying to do now. I mean, at least we've got every player has the same stats as opposed to the left tackle has only let someone around him 4 times. I mean, you know, come on. So I think basketball, I don't think it'll ever catch up to baseball. It's just baseball's an accountant's game. but it's not as bad as football. I mean, you can measure a lot and get a good feel for it. And particularly when you look at how accurate Oliver's formula has been for teams. I mean, it's clear that he's pretty close with offense. And, you know, we can all build on that. Yeah.
Anything else? Well, thank you, John.
Thank you. No, appreciate it. And,